Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Westworld?
What the hell is Westworld?
If you're saying what the hell is Westworld, then this episode of Infants on Thrones is definitely not for you.
This is Infants on Thrones. The philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the Quorum.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Ostland, and today we're going to talk about the HBO series Westworld, which recently aired its season finale this past Sunday, and several of us on Infants on Thrones and several of our friends are super huge Westworld fan nerds. And so today you're going to hear us geek out about Westworld. If you don't know anything about Westworld, this is probably going to be a really frustrating conversation for you. If you do know about Westworld, it still might. So first thing I want to do is make a public apology to a friend of ours, Micah Nicolaisen, who I originally asked to be on this panel and then asked to not be on this panel because there were too many people. And, you know, in retrospect, I feel like I kind of just jerked him around, and I want to say I'm sorry, Micah. Should have had you on, and I'll make it up to you. I really am sorry about that. On the panel, we do have Andrew Ainsworth. We have Lindsay Hansen Park, who started a Westworld Facebook group for Mormons who love Westworld. She'll talk about that. And then we've got myself and Matt and Scott and John Hamer wrapping up the panel. So we're going to talk about Westworld, and we're just going to start right now, and I'll assume that those of you who are continuing to listen to this have a sense of what this show is, and we don't have to explain it to you, so let's just go.
Hey guys, can we have a little inside joke between us during the episode?
Sure.
The goal is to say as many times as possible.
Should we let the audience in on that?
No.
So here's what I'm going to do, Andrew, because I just recorded what you just said.
No.
I'm going to bleep out the word. So the audience will have to guess what is the word that we're playing the game on. So,
did you guys do that on your mission during the farewell talk where a companion or someone gave you a weird word you had to use in your final testimony? Was that just my mission did that?
No.
Yeah, ours was always bestiality.
What? For real?
No.
That would be pretty awesome. You could do that. You could come back and give a talk. You know, the people of Japan are really great, and you know they make really good members of the church once they overcome their bestiality. That could work.
It works in every culture.
That could work. All right. So, Westworld. So, before we get into this, maybe let's just go around and everybody can say a little bit about what they're thankful about for Westworld. This is like the Thanksgiving tradition extended to Westworld. Lindsay, I'd like to hear from you.
We're having a testimony meeting about Westworld?
Testimony. Well, okay, it's kind of like the Thanksgiving table, what you're thankful for Westworld. Like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, my experience with this is usually I'll express my opinion and then I'll make someone cry. So,
awesome.
Make sure you guys will behave. I'm so crazy about this show. I know I shouldn't be because some people thought that the ending was too cliche, but the thing that I love the most about Westworld is the music covers.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, and like the music and the Debussy, it's so great. So I love the music.
Yeah, when they started playing Paint It Back, Paint It Black with the... Yeah, I think that was the first one, because that was in the first episode when they were doing that Rolling Stones song. Paint It Black, that's the name of the song, right?
Yeah, and they did another song. They did House of the Rising Sun.
Right.
The episodes as well.
And they did Back to Black with, which some people, there's some like fan theories out there about the music and the titles that they choose that have to do with the Man in Black and the time changing and all of that. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, because then it's Black Hole Sun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Back to Black. So that's 3 that we know of. I don't know. There's some fan theories on it. And if you notice when they play Debussy theme songs, they are in certain periods of time when they're talking about Arnold and that kind of thing. So interesting.
Yeah, well, I tried to go through the lyrics of those songs to see if there was meaning. I think you're right. It's the title.
All right, Scott. What about you? Why are you thankful for Westworld?
Wow, you guys are like super Westworld nerds here with knowing what the songs mean and stuff like that. I'm thankful because I didn't know that you could make robots come out of a sour cream bucket and like, turn into these machines that could then remember things.
It's yogurt.
Is it yogurt?
It's yogurt. Whatever that thing is that they dip them in.
I was really hoping for sour cream.
That's funny. What were you saying, Andrew?
I thought it was synthetic semen.
Oh, that was probably better left unsaid.
I think you're projecting. And that's what you were thankful for, Andrew?
I'll wait my turn.
Okay.
Well, welcome to Infants on Thrones, Lindsay.
Yeah, who knew that a bunch of dudes would end up talking about buckets of semen?
Right. Who would have ever guessed anything like
In
that?
the first 2 minutes.
Well, in fairness, I was going to say I was thankful for the boobies.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of boobs. Yeah. Did you notice
You
that
guys are
one
making
episode?
me feel really uncomfortable.
Did you notice the one episode where it was like the first 5 minutes and it was all just naked dudes? And I was like, who wrote this thing? Who wrote this episode?
Glenn.
And then I realized I needed to check my privilege because it's like a 99-to-1 female to male ratio in the nude scenes.
Oh, you were just focusing on the men.
Well, they showed like 3 men in a row and I was pissed off. And then I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah, but I like how they strategically put their hand in the bottom area. Everyone.
Yeah.
All the
We
hosts.
do see a lot of seated butts in this show.
Yes.
Do you know that?
But
I never knew what so many naked butts looked like sitting down, but now I do.
But didn't it kind of like desensitize you to nudity a little bit in the course of it? Because you buy into the illusion that we're looking at androids. So it's like looking at a mannequin nude. Just
Well,
really
it's
detailed.
that they like grease them up when they're in cold storage or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're like greased up, shiny bodies.
Oh, like the corpses that stand as sentinels outside of Ford's little workshop.
Yeah,
There was like a Voldemort trap or something. I always thought that whenever people would walk by, I'm like waiting for them to come alive.
Why did they say so? In one of the first episodes, they talk about like, oh, it's going to smell down there because the coolant system is down,
Right, yeah.
and it's like been down the whole time. So why does it smell? That's what I don't quite understand.
Because it's still human flesh
Is
and
it
stuff.
flesh?
Right? Yeah.
Because
They're
Here's
flesh
what
and
I don't-
bones.
Here's what I don't get. They've got this park, right, which is like Singapore clean. Like it's just crazy clean everywhere. And then they build these hosts and they stick them down in like the meat locker where the lights don't ever work, right? And it's just disgusting down there. Like, wouldn't they have them all in racks and in little bags with labels on them and stuff like that, and not just standing there like a bunch of, zombies?
Well, I think the story, the untold story behind why those corpses are there, Scott, is that they were meant to be retired, but Ford had other purposes in mind for them. So he said, I'll take them, and I'll put them here. And so there's a reason why they were there.
But they're just so disorganized. That's my problem.
But they weren't. They only looked like they were to fool people because Ford was pulling the strings the whole time.
I just want to know if this is a park, why they aren't selling more churros. Like I would expect there to.
There was a lack of churro.
Hand dip, corn dogs, and churros.
Right. Yeah, or cactus juice.
Yeah.
Why wasn't there any cactus
Yeah.
juice?
Yeah, that would
Agave.
be really
Cactus
gross if there was some of that.
cacti at all.
Well, there were cacti around because it's out in the west, right?
I don't. It's more high desert than.
Didn't see them.
That's like Moabby.
Yeah. Where
It
did they
is
film
filmed
it?
in
Did they film it
Moab.
in Moab? Okay.
Yeah,
filmed in
Moab
Moab.
and also Monument Valley, and then some scenes are in Southern California.
Yeah. All right,
It is beautiful.
Matt. What did you like about? Let's make our rounds and then get into this smack up. What did you like about it?
I liked the storytelling, kind of from beginning to end, wondering where it was going. The acting was, I thought, phenomenal. I love Anthony Hopkins, and
Yeah, he's good.
so I like HBO short series
Yeah.
generally.
Right.
So it was one of the best series or seasons, I guess, that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
I'll put it up there with the first season of Heroes.
Oh, the first season of Heroes. Maybe like the first 8 episodes of the first season of Heroes.
But it was moving things along. I'm so used to these episodes,
Yeah.
Lost, Walking Dead, that it just felt like they're drawing out. But every episode really advanced the story.
Yeah. All right, Andrew, your turn.
Westworld has changed my life forever.
Really?
No. The weird thing is like I've never been super geeked out about a show. Like I've never been a Trekkie. I've never been super into a show. So it was really unexpected for me to get all geeked out by this show. I got so geeked out by it that I watched every episode at least twice, but a lot of them I watched 3 and 4 times. And, every episode was like the scriptures to me, every time you reread that chapter, you find something new.
Exactly.
And I got so geeked out about it that I actually got into a Westworld podcast. There's a lot of Westworld podcasts out there, but the one in particular I listen to, they do 3 episodes per week, 3 podcast episodes per week on just each Westworld episode. So I've listened to 28 podcast episodes about the show, in addition to watching every episode 2 to 4 times. So I'm kind of surprised by it. I think the reason I'm trying to figure out why it pushed all my geek buttons.
Right.
I think one reason is I absolutely love Westerns. And, my grandpa had horses, and there's some cowboys in our family line. So kind of has this mythical family history past that, I dig. But also I think the show raises some of the most philosophical and theological questions, and particularly, as I'm sure we'll be discussing, as an ex-Mormon, I think there's a lot of interesting parallels. Like the show is a very interesting metaphor to me for waking up and leaving your church, leaving your programming behind.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'm all geeked out.
Oh, Andrew, that's adorable. It's exactly what the simulators want you to do.
I know, right?
Yeah, you're totally on script.
So
That's
Andrew,
how effective the programming is. Yeah.
did you feel like the Western stuff kind of tapered off towards the end of the season? Because I saw that in the first few episodes, and then and I was really hoping they were going to have like a train robbery scene, or there's going to be like they're going to start tying in all these different Western shticks, but in a cool modern way. And so I'm hoping for that in future episodes.
Yeah, it seemed the longer the season went on, the more time we spent in Delos headquarters.
Right.
And less time out on the range. So
can we do another round of everybody of biggest plot? 30 seconds on your biggest plot hole.
Yeah, but I didn't get to say mine, Scott.
Oh, sorry.
I let all you guys go first, and I was waiting. But then we can. Can I say?
Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
So for
Glenn, the Westworld whisperer.
Whisper.
Apologist.
I'm always the apologist with Matt. But I think for me, it came at a time. I've recently read this book, Short History of Nearly Everything, which I've talked about on the podcast. The Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind book that's talking about the brain. So all these questions about consciousness and memories, and what is the line between all of the atoms that constitute the desk that I'm sitting at, or the chair that I'm sitting on, or me who's doing the sitting. of those three things, one of them is alive, me. What's the difference? So you kind of have these questions where you've got these androids that are built out of stuff, but they're alive, or are they? And that whole pyramid thing that they brought up on the show of, first you have to have the ability to have memories in order to have any kind of consciousness, and then improvisation, that you're able to go off script and actually, that's basically their way of saying free agency if you're going to do Mormon parallels. And then the step of consciousness and what that is. So it was the promise of exploring those kinds of themes that really hooked me from the first episode. And there was a lot of creativity in the storytelling, and it just was a beautiful show to watch. And so I love it.
Amen.
Yeah. So what did you want to do, Scott? You wanted to go around one more time and talk about twists?
Well, no, plot holes, because I've got some beefs with it, or we can just work those in as we go along.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, let's work those in as we go along. So we're going to do...
I did want to say, I'm happy to have Lindsay on, because she does what she always does, which is unlike Stunstone, brings all the nerds together. And she's done that on Facebook, as we've been able to talk about Game of Thrones.
Yeah, we should give an explanation that we're all here because of Lindsay, because she created this cool group.
Did you create the group?
It's my proudest moment.
Of all the things you've been in charge of, your Facebook group that talks about television.
We have a nerdy... Okay, so I gotta brag about this. So I am into Game of Thrones. It's the plot hole in my feminist theory, but I love Game of Thrones. And so we started a little Mormon Facebook group about it, because I want to still make Mormon inside jokes and talk about TV. And the cover photo I was very proud of. It had Mormont on it, and he said, "I'm a Mormon. I know it. I live it. I love it."
Yeah.
And I thought that was really clever. So, yeah, I got to invite a lot of my nerd friends, and now we talk about Westworld.
So, but Game of Thrones is a hole in your feminist theory, really? Because everything's moving towards like the shift in power from male to female, isn't it?
It's
Daenerys.
Like they use rape as like a plot device, and they like a character development.
Only like a dozen or 24 times.
Right. And it's like, especially the first few seasons, you've probably talked about this critique. It's like a 13-year-old boy wrote it. It was like, let's have girls that are covered in oil slithering up against each other, making out, so just stuff like that. But I love it. It's kind of great.
The show, or the girls in oil making out?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that not clear?
Okay.
I'll let
It's the show that you love.
Yeah, I do love the show.
Yeah.
I do love the show. And I think there's some strong female characters in it. I mean, I could critique it all day long.
All the male leaders are dying, and they're being replaced by female leaders.
That's the way we want it.
Yeah.
The way we want it.
Yeah. Well, it's happening. So, all right, Westworld. So we're going to be smacking up this Vanity Fair article that was posted in Lindsay's Facebook nerd group, if that's what we're calling it. And it's called Westworld, answering 9 burning questions from that puzzling finale, plus the twist no one saw coming. It was written by Joanna Robinson, published in Vanity Fair. I don't know if I said that already. So we'll start reading it, and we'll talk about it as we go. So who wants to lead off?
I will.
All right.
Well, that was a fascinating hour and a half of television. The biggest narrative reversal of the night was no one predicted, Ford's redemption. I'd have to rewatch the season to see if I buy this as Ford's plan all along. If he loves hosts so much, how do you explain that scene where he sliced one's face open to prove their lack of humanity? Protesting too much? An elaborate cover? But whether Ford's arc changed midway through the season thanks to rewrites or not, Hopkins delivered the character's goodbye with effortless panache. It was Hopkins, in the end, who was asked to do much of the expositional lifting in the bicameral mind, and I can think of no one better.
All right, Matt, so you actually went back and you watched to see if this was Ford's plan all along. What do you think?
I did, and it was. There's some very specific dialogue in the first couple episodes that reveal his thought of humanity and evolution and kind of what the hosts are and could be. They seem kind of throwaways, and they're real subtle, but when you know what the end is, they're very significant.
And so what was he trying to do all along?
Oh, free the host.
I think he was trying to push the line between consciousness and not, but it seemed to me like towards the end of the episode, he did make a switch where he was realizing that, yeah, there's some problems here. You don't think so? You're saying that was where he was going with it from the beginning?
Yeah, no, I think where he was going with this from the beginning of the show when we started watching, episode 1, that he's always like he talked about this new narrative that he was going to introduce to the park, and he knew what that new narrative was going to be, and it was his orchestrated suicide that was similar to his partner Arnold's orchestrated suicide 34 years earlier, where the hosts actually pulled the trigger. These androids that they built pulled the trigger, but the difference in Ford's case is that they do it of their own free will instead of being programmed to do it, because his partner Arnold at the beginning, when they were building these things, he wanted the hosts to be alive, right? He wanted to try and create life because his son had died. I'm probably going into too much detail.
So can I ask a question though?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's accept your premise that he wanted this all along. How do you reconcile? There's a scene early on, I want to say it's like in the 3rd or 4th episode, where he is telling he's telling Bernard, Ford is telling Bernard, don't think that they are real. They are not real. That was Arnold's problem. Do you guys remember that conversation?
Yeah.
So how does that fit into this theory?
I agree with Lindsay. I disagreed with the author of this Vanity Fair piece when she characterizes this as Ford's redemption, because I agree with Glenn that Ford all along was trying to help these hosts become conscious. But I don't believe that it was for an altruistic motive. I don't believe it was for the sake of the hosts. And I think the big clue to that is the finale episode when, what's her name? Charlotte, the attractive black female who kind of represents the board of Delos. She comes in basically and says, yeah, you're going to resign tonight. We're taking over. And he says to her, aren't you afraid that I might smash all my toys?
Right.
And go, I think, yes, Ford was trying to get these hosts to be conscious, but not because he all of a sudden started to love about them and care about them as, quasi-human beings. To me, this was a vindictive, bitter, spiteful, hey, big corporation who thinks you can kick me out and separate me from my life's work and my creations. I'm going to show you. I'm going to smash all my toys and go home. I'm basically going to let these hosts become conscious and wreak havoc on all of you and Westworld.
Yeah, this was kind of his insurance policy. If they ever tried to shove him out from his creation, that he wasn't going to let them. He wasn't going to go quietly.
And he knew. I mean, I think he knew that was going to happen. I think to answer your question, Lindsay, when Ford tells Bernard, "Don't think that they're real," it's because they weren't. They hadn't achieved consciousness yet. He could have followed it up by saying, "But if I succeed in what I'm trying to do, they will be." But that wouldn't have been good.
So I think I'm alone in that I am kind of seduced by the theory that Ford, like the Ford that we saw die, is not a real Ford. I just don't see to what end that like what he gets out of that. I'm a little suspicious of that storyline of taking it at face value.
So one of the things that we don't really know a lot about from season 1 is what the outside world is like. Westworld is this theme park where people go to experience things that they can't experience in the real world, and there are some points where they're talking about what things are like in the real world, and they talk about how they've been able to cure all kinds of diseases, basically prevent death. It's they haven't gotten to the point where they can resurrect people with technology, but they're close. They kind of hint that that's something that could happen. So I think, and as Ford talks about the outside world, he's really disillusioned with it. And he talks about the humanity is no longer evolving. We've stopped. We've reached the pinnacle of our existence. And I think that's a really bleak worldview for him. He also doesn't have really power in the outside world, but in Westworld, he has power. So, does everybody want to live forever? No. Did Ford want to live forever? No. And I think when he saw that the writing was on the wall, that his time as director of the park was done, he said, I'd rather just be dead than have to live in this sterile, perfect outside world for the rest of my life.
I really hope it was not a host, because I'm afraid they're going to use that. That was my fear when the reveal with Bernard, is that they'd keep going to that. It's like time travel. Yeah. That's always their way to write themselves out. Right. So I hope that's not the case. And I tend to believe that Ford was he was done. Just what you said, he was done living. And again, he has a line really early on where they talk about how the world has moved on and how much progress they've made and how much better that it's gotten. He kind of has a line as well, in some ways maybe, but not all. And I think that's a reflection of they really don't have humanity, because they don't deal with sickness, death, and some of these other things as to why they need to go to Westworld to actually experience living.
So can I give a theory that I heard outside of this that maybe Andrew wants to tie back into Mormon stuff? I was actually at a fireside, if you'll believe it, with BYU professor Steve Peck, and he's an evolutionary biology teacher, and he was.
Is that the Short Stay in Hell?
Yeah,
guy?
Yeah.
Love that book.
Fantastic. This guy is brilliant. And so we're talking about human evolution. It was this great discussion. And he was talking about the idea of qualia. Have you guys heard of that before? It's like this theory of consciousness, qualia.
Is that a type of cactus?
It is.
No.
It is. Oh my gosh. Look at all the twists and turns. No. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but there are all these different theories of qualia, and basically the broad definition is what it is like, is what it means. And so there are all these philosophers trying to discuss it, and Steve told us of this one philosopher who uses this argument called the knowledge argument, and the philosopher, I think, is Frank Jackson. And he talks about this scientist, okay? So picture the scientist named Mary, and Mary knows everything that there is to know about the color red. Like, she studies it in her lab. She knows exactly what happens with the neurological firings that register when the color is seen. She's everything that there is to know about the color red. She knows it, right? She's studied it her entire life. But Mary is colorblind. And so she can't see the color red. And so she gets a corrective surgery where she's able to see it, and she sees color red for the first time. And there's nothing that she can quantify in her study or her work that can explain or describe the feeling of experiencing color red for the first time, right? And so there's this idea of that's what consciousness is. And I've been reading about that since, and there seems to be there's this gap between scientific understanding and philosophy and consciousness. And the idea basically is that science has its limits, but it can't, for some reason, is limited at quantifying what consciousness is. And so when I had that in my background of my mind, I was thinking of sort of the hubris of maybe Ford trying to, maybe his motivations are explaining this gap, right? My world might be so advanced on the outside and they think that they can do all of these things, but nobody can do what we did, which is discover and quantify consciousness. So I don't know, it's kind of a weird sidebar, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's pretty much how Sam Harris defines consciousness when he talks about it as well. If you can know what it's like to be something, or if you could understand what it would like to be a creature, then that creature is conscious.
I would love to hear John Hamer's take on this argument too, just because I think it's such an interesting idea. Like, Ford gives this whole big speech at the end about consciousness.
Yeah.
Which I love, especially after, talking to Steve Peck about it, because I think that is the one thing. I mean, Steve Peck is, what I love about him is he's so optimistic. So we're sitting there and we're talking about how humans aren't evolving anymore, right? We're stopping genetic mutations by getting our teeth fixed and getting our eyes fixed and all of these things that would have been selective qualities in human beings, right, to help us evolve. And of course, my mind is going we're all going to die. The human race is doomed. And Steve is crazy optimistic. He was like, this is what's so great about humanity. And so talking to him about that and consciousness, I think that it's an interesting struggle in science right now. And I love that Westworld sort of deals with these sort of philosophical questions that humans are asking. I don't know.
Do you guys think that Ford knows that about the whole thing that's going on with Charlotte and all the chaos that's unfolding during the same episode?
And by Charlotte, Scott means Maeve, which Lindsay somehow was able to pick up on, so we were able to go home without missing a beat. Good job.
Well, remember we saw that somebody has altered her code, right? So she was on her loop. Technically, she didn't want to be, but this is how I understood that, and you guys please correct me if I'm wrong. I understood her as not being conscious. She didn't have the consciousness that maybe oh my gosh, I just lost her.
Dolores.
Oh, we're talking about Dolores? Oh, I thought you asked about Charlotte.
No, I did, but Lindsay's saying, oh, go ahead.
So I think Charlotte did not have the consciousness that Dolores had. I think it seems that Charlotte is on a loop because they talked about it. I don't know if you remember that scene in the finale where he's saying, oh, you're actually programmed to do this.
This is Maeve.
You're confusing the two black females.
Who are
yeah, they don't all look alike, Lindsay.
It's not Charlotte. Her name's Maeve. I just think she's the whore to me.
Did I say Charlotte? Sorry, I meant Maeve.
Oh, I said Charlotte first. My fault.
Do you want me to say that again? Do you guys edit these?
I can edit it. Yeah. If you want to take two, or maybe I'll just leave it in and do other types of edits. You know, you never can tell with bees.
Yeah. Okay. So So Maeve, her script has been altered, right? We know that someone went in and did that, and she was resistant to it. She was upset by it because she thought she was acting on her own. And I don't see her as being conscious in the same way that Dolores is. Dolores has been working for a long time to evolve into this consciousness. And there's something about this virus of the words that she says in the first few episodes of these violent delights will have violent ends. And so I think that is to sort of trick the viewers into thinking that Maeve is developing consciousness, but it's clear at the end that she's acting out a loop, right? A loop that someone has written for her.
Right.
So I don't know what that means, but that's just my take on it.
And was that what they were getting at with her coming back for her daughter, getting off the train and coming back into the park? Was that she really didn't have a choice because that was programmed in? That's how I took that scene.
I can't tell if that's like her moving towards consciousness or just moving on her script. I don't know.
Did she go back for her daughter, or did she go back to liberate all of the hosts in cold storage?
Well, she was sitting there thinking about her daughter, and then somebody sat down with their kid, and they'd had the scene earlier in the episode where she decided no, she wasn't going to go back for her daughter because that wasn't ever her daughter. It was just whoever she was programmed to be. So it seemed like they were developing that part of the story. So while we're talking about the coercion thing, Felix, I've got a real beef with Felix, the Asian-y looking tech guy.
Felix, the tech, the wonderful, wonderful tech.
Like, if you start getting coerced by Maeve, why don't you just go and tell your boss that this is going on, like, the next day? Like, just go in and fall on your sword. And I mean, at that point, best case scenario, you're just getting fired, and instead of like slaughtering people and destroying this whole park and all the other damage that could come about. I just don't really see what his motivation is for not blowing the whistle on that way early.
There were a couple of things that happened with Felix that made me wonder. And I know now we're getting into that whole like Mission Impossible. He's wearing a mask that looks like the guy that it is, but like that kind of sloppy tropes. But wondering if Felix is a host, and that Felix was built by Ford and given that signature where when hosts look at him, they think that he's a human. Like we saw that in some kind of an experiment with Clementine when. They were proving that she could actually harm humans. They reprogrammed a host to read like a human. So is it possible that Felix was there to guide Maeve and allow her to do all these things, and that he wasn't, because otherwise I think you're right, Scott. It doesn't really make sense that he would do what he did.
Okay, so I thought about that, but then in this last episode, they seemed to slam the door on that, because when Felix came upon Bernard's, corpse, and Maeve said to Felix, "Can you fix him?" And then Felix says, "Oh, he's one of you." And then he starts looking at his own hands and he's like freaking out, right? And then Maeve says, "Oh, for fuck's sake, you're not one of them. You're not one of us. You're one of them."
Right, but if he was programmed to read like a human, Maeve wouldn't be able to. Maeve would think that he's a human.
Yeah,
and
but Maeve
even
was
he
like,
could think
Maeve,
that he's a human.
But Maeve had everything dialed up to like 1,000 at that point. Like
and Maeve could tell that Bernard was not a human. I that struck me.
Right.
She kind of looked at him, and they had this knowing between them.
Yeah.
I got the feeling that Maeve had some kind of like inside knowledge once she grabbed the little iPad. She did like a Matrix style upload of kind of what was going on. But
I agree with you, Scott. I think that the Felix character is kind of a weak spot in the narrative, because he just conveniently does everything that he needs to do to get Maeve to the place where Ford wants her.
Yeah, he's just her scared little puppy dog, and it just doesn't work for me. And if it was one scene, I wouldn't have much of a problem with it. But it's like every episode.
Significant role. John, did you join?
Yeah, hi.
Hey, John. So I just sent on Skype a link to this article that we're ostensibly reading, and we've read the first paragraph, but not the second.
Can I ask John a question?
Yeah.
John, I was just talking about, I think I'm pronouncing this right, qualia, the idea of sort of philosophical consciousness. And I'm assuming that since you're on here, you've watched the series, right?
Yes. Yeah, I've been watching it.
Okay, so did you see that as like the overarching theme in Westworld, like the striving for consciousness? Or do you think that there's something else going on?
Well, I thought that when the show started, that there was a lot of potential, that maybe that was what they were exploring. On the one hand, the two things that I kind of saw being explored were, what does it really mean to be human? So actually exploring what all of the guests are like, and and obviously in the case of what the show ultimately did is that they just immediately all go to extreme base instincts, as opposed to like any kind of real exploration of that, I kind of feel like. And then, but that was at least one of the potentials. And then the other potential was on the other side of it, what is the, what constitutes consciousness in an artificial being in this way? And so, and that's been, that kind of has been ongoing, because that, like you say, that there's been this idea that there's emerging consciousness among the different ones. But then we saw with one of the core leads, Maeve, that maybe actually she's being scripted, although possibly the script is leaving her open to decisions at the end, whether she's going to, go on the script that she's infiltrating the outside world, or whether she chooses she wants to come back, whether Dolores, is scripted to kill her maker, but whether she has to choose it in the end, as opposed to whether she's just totally scripted to do that. So.
Okay. Do you want to keep reading? See where this takes us?
Yeah, let's keep reading.
All right, John. Why don't you pick up take where it says "Speaking with Thrillist last month."
Speaking with Thrillist last month, Evan Rachel Wood described Westworld's first scene as, quote, an amazing prequel and a good setup for the actual show, unquote. That means what we watched was essentially prologue for a series that will, in theory, be about sentient robots gleefully slaughtering or gently protecting humanity in various parks owned by Delos. Will they make their way out into the wider world? Perhaps, but for now, let's break down what actually happened in the confines of the park and endeavor to tie up as many dangling threads as possible.
So what do you guys think about that? Do you think that's where season 2 is going to go? That it's going to be like robots? It's going to be like Terminator?
Yeah, I hope it doesn't just become the robot version of X-Men. You've got the evil X-Men and the benevolent ones who are protecting the weak humans.
Yeah.
Right.
So I hope they don't. I hope they continue this idea of determinism versus free will, humanity, the things that they've done here, just in a more progressed way for the hosts, and also get into the real world in that time frame.
The interesting topic or theme to me in that paragraph that is kind of hinted at, where she says, the subsequent seasons are going to be about sentient robots gleefully slaughtering or gently protecting humanity. It's going to be interesting here because we've seen that, both Arnold and Dr. Ford, when they saw what human beings do in a world that doesn't have laws and rules, when they can just go hog wild and they just see, the ugly underbelly of human nature, and that really sours their whole view of human beings. It's going to be maybe an interesting theme that they explore in these next seasons. Once these hosts, these AIs become conscious, are they going to be, just as base and animal as humans and just try to slaughter the human beings? Or are they going to be better than humans and actually become more compassionate and take pity on the human beings and protect them? So that's an interesting idea of where it might go in the future to me.
You're talking about ex-Mormons again, aren't you? Like, are ex-Mormons going to be more... are they going to raise the bar,
Lengthen our stride.
Yeah, okay.
More human than human.
Yeah.
So I think, this is just my take, but I think the only one person being in this show that we can consider being conscious that's a robot is Dolores at this point. And we know so little about that, but we think so. I mean, look at how much has been worked on to get her to this state. So like this whole army of other people, I don't really have any information to believe that they're conscious yet. Same thing with Bernard, same thing with Maeve, and they might be. Maybe they're just going to like skip all of that and like have us assume, and I'm fine doing that. I think that the finale like tied up some threads in a way that was probably too heavy-handed for some viewers, but it also asked some questions like, what was up with the samurai dudes? Like, yeah. I don't know what that's about, but we do know that the tech guy that helped Maeve escape? Felix kind of said like, oh yeah, it's a long story. There's a lot going on. So I think I would be disappointed if it did turn into this sort of Terminator thing. But I also don't know if if Disneyland had the kind of fatality rate that Westworld experienced on that night, if they would be able to open it back up again.
Well, I was wondering if the different parks are going to be different, all different themed, right? So it's kind of like if you buy into Westworld, it's like a time machine where if you want to go back to medieval Japan and play samurai, there's a park for that. So maybe that's what they were developing.
The original movie, has the 3 theme parks.
Right.
So Westworld is one of 3. There's the medieval world and Roman world. So,
and there's been talk about using the other worlds as spin-offs. So we may get completely different series exploring some of those other worlds.
If this is in the future, do you think they have like 2016 world where it's like Trump has been elected president and like there's a new version of the iPhone out? I don't know.
Yeah, but it does seem significant that Dolores is the only real potentially conscious one because she's the first. So it may speak to it takes that much time of dying and being in the loop and going whatever progress she made that she went through in order to get to that point. So it may prevent some of the other hosts from getting there for a long, long time.
Did you guys catch something that they said in this last episode, that it was on an island?
Oh, no.
I thought they said something about it being on an island, but we still don't know geographically like where this enormous place is.
Right.
Space.
You know what? That reminds me of
There's fan theory on that.
Oh,
the fan theory, it's like on another planet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Can I go off on my Mormon sidebar for a minute?
Mm-hmm. Please.
Of course.
So in the finale, they're like, she's dying. Dolores is dying in Teddy's arms in the ocean, right? And then all of a sudden, there's like this stage light that comes on, and you can see the water is only a few feet wide or whatever, like it's on a studio lot. And I was thinking, for all their consciousness or whatever, not one of the robots turns around and is like, what's going on? Why is there does the water end and there's a spotlight? Because of this mechanism that they're programmed in place with, right? That when they see something out of character, they say, that doesn't look like anything to me. And I've been using that since I watched Westworld. This is such like a Mormon thing when it's like when you're in the church, you're trying to talk to your faithful family members about something.
Book of Abraham.
Yeah, and like they're hearing you and they're like nodding and their ears are working. And but their brain is going, that doesn't look like anything to me.
I think there's a song about that.
And
Turn it off.
Like a light switch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think even the inability to
different,
conceive of some of these questions.
Yeah, it's like that's what I'm saying. Like the turn it off song is like I am experiencing it and I need to shut it down. But this is like I am hearing what you're saying and I literally do not have any programming to process this at all.
It just doesn't soak in at all.
No, it's like when you talk to TBM family members and bring up the fact that Joseph Smith married 14-year-old girls, and they're like, "It doesn't look like anything to me." Like I can't understand. I can't understand why you'd be concerned about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I like this sort of metaphor because it honestly, it's like it's happening. You're having the conversation and they're hearing it, but they just don't have the tools in their brain to process information in the way that you process. Now that said, like I don't want to say that the person saying it is so enlightened. I think that's why I like Westworld because it's showing this tension between are humans really the enlightened ones? We're saying that consciousness is like the way to go. That's the end goal, but maybe.
Well,
like,
I'll say if there were 6 TBMs that were sitting and having this conversation and they were talking about ex-Mormons, they could probably use feeling the spirit as an example of they could be talking with us and we could be like, yeah, but we don't really know what they're talking about. Or like when they start talking about metaphysical things that are just assumptions that they have that we don't have and don't see the world that way. So it's kind of like a blind spot on our... I think there's definitely blind spots for me where, like, every once in a while I'll hear something and I'll like, oh yeah, I used to think about things that way. Or I really used to feel that. They could say something that would elicit a feeling that no longer does that. But then I remember, oh yeah, I used to, like if I'm watching the Temple movie, every time I saw the Temple movie when they raised their hand and cast Lucifer from their mist and he like breaks the branch because he's angry. I used to get like the spirit tinglies all up like, oh yes. Yeah.
So that's when your ex-Mormon brain hears the voice of Arnold that says, remember.
Yeah, right. But I wouldn't that doesn't feel like anything to me. That doesn't look like anything to me. It's just a guy breaking a branch off a tree.
That's very allegory of the cave, right?
Yeah. Right. That's Plato. Did we lose John?
Oh, it's Matt.
I'm here.
He's here with me, though. It's fine.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to the next paragraph. What did Arnold want?
What did Arnold want? To understand what Ford wanted, it's first important to make sure we completely get what his long-lost partner, Arnold Weber, wanted. It may seem clear enough, but it's worth going over. Before the park opened, Arnold's work was driven by his own personal tragedy, the loss of a son, which left him understandably jaded about the human condition. Ford explained the difference between the two Westworld founders back in episode 4. And then this is a quote. Quote, in the beginning, I imagined things would be perfectly balanced. Even had a bet with my partner Arnold to that effect. We made 100 hopeful storylines. Of course, almost no one took us up on them. I lost the bet. Arnold always held a somewhat dim view of people. He preferred the hosts. He begged me not to let you people in, the money men. Delos. End quote. Keep reading.
Well, and any conversation there around Arnold? What Arnold wanted?
I guess
I think there's conversation, but maybe we should let her finish the next two paragraphs just to close out the Arnold section.
All right.
This speech is admittedly a little confusing. Who is refusing to take Arnold and Ford up on their hundreds of hopeful storylines if Arnold already died before the park opened? Test guess?
The engineers that were with them, the team of engineers. How about that?
Anyway, the point is Arnold started to view the hosts as potentially more evolved versions of humans. His, quote, maze games, more on that later, was constructed to prove that hosts had true consciousness and were alive. If they were alive, Arnold didn't want to doom them to unending enslavement in the park. He got very close to waking Dolores up, but not close enough to convince Ford that opening the park was folly. So he programmed Dolores to slaughter all of her fellow hosts, then kill him. In the style of the Manchurian Candidate, he used music, Debussy's Reveries, and a phrase, "These violent delights have violent ends," to put Dolores into assassin mode. This wasn't an act of free will or consciousness. This was programming.
And then you got one last paragraph.
And then one more. Okay. Shoot. Sorry, my computer's froze. Does someone want to pick that one up?
I'll do it. Okay. In other words, as Dolores put it several episodes ago. Oh, I'm hearing my echo now. Okay, I'm going to read it again. In other words, as Dolores put it several episodes ago, Arnold wanted her help to destroy this place. He figured if he committed suicide via host, Ford would be shocked into seeing things from his point of view. But Arnold underestimated his partner's God complex, and Ford opened the park despite the death of his best friend. I kind of take issue with this interpretation. I don't think that's why Arnold committed suicide, because he was trying to get the park shut and thought that if he was killed, that would shut the park.
Why do you think he did that then?
Well, I think that he was depressed from the death of his son. Never got over that, and kind of created in Dolores a proxy for his son. It's kind of like the Geppetto Pinocchio thing. He's able to turn Dolores into a real boy and be like his son. He's able to create life. In the case of his son, he didn't have any control for as much control as he has, whatever. He couldn't save his son. But here he could bring life to Dolores, and he came so close, and he loved it. And this was his redemption, to be able to bring life. And then Ford said, you can't do it. You got to roll her back. And rolling her back to Bernard, or to Arnold, meant killing her. So to me, that trick that put him in such like a desperate place that his only choice was to roll her back. So he said, "No, I'm just going to end this." But I don't think he did it to close the park.
I viewed it. I had a different take, which was that Arnold killed himself because he felt like he had done a horrible thing by creating AI. And where you get the big clue to that is, remember when Dolores goes into the confessional and then she's being lowered on an elevator, and she's going down into like a Delos kind of, I don't know, lab or something.
Right.
Now, remember when it's in a couple of episodes. It's in the finale, and it's in episode number 9. You see a young Anthony Hopkins, a young Dr. Ford walking past her, not even acknowledging her. And he goes into a room and he has an argument with Arnold. And if you're not watching it with the closed captioning on, you can't really hear what's being said. But if you watch it with the closed captioning on, it has Arnold saying he's basically despondent about the fact that he feels like it's a terrible thing they've done, that they've created these sentient beings that are then experiencing suffering. They're experiencing pain. And Arnold is saying, we cry when we come into this world. He's feeling like he's standing in the shoes of God, where he's created all of these creations that are now exposed to this existence of pain and suffering, and feeling like it's a horrible, unconscionable, cruel thing that they've done. And so I kind of read my take on Arnold's suicide is perhaps just that he's like those scientists who helped discover the atom bomb. Yes, it's an achievement of science, but the suffering that it's unleashed on humanity is very difficult on your conscience. So that was my take on Arnold's suicide. It's the creator's dilemma. Yeah. Do you create sentient beings knowing that they are going to inevitably experience pain and suffering
over and over and over again for the entertainment of paying customers?
And once you recognize that, do you say it would have been better that I had not created them at all? In a lot of the creation stories, God ends up, from around the world, God ends up regretting his decision to create humanity. And, usually the myths are because human beings are such naughty creatures. But to me, this was a better creation myth to me, that God regrets his creation because he realizes that creating sentient beings inevitably exposes people, subjects people without their choosing. You just bring them into the world to all this pain and suffering. Should I have not created them at all? Have I done a horrible thing?
Well, and creating them to become playthings for petty gods, where they're eventually going to go insane by going through all these traumatic experiences and having these loaded traumatic memories. So I thought it was a purge to protect them from humans.
But he didn't just program them to kill him. He programmed them to kill each other.
Right. That was protecting them, so that they couldn't. So it was to close the park, so the humans couldn't have access to them.
I'm hearing an echo.
Can I read something from a different article really quick? Okay, so I just want to remind everyone that what we know about Arnold is mostly what Ford tells us, right? We see them. We think we're seeing the memories of Dolores, but this is from theweek.com, and they wrote a recap of the finale, and they were talking about the two different Fords. And so this is just a quote that they say, quote, Westworld's real problem, though, the source of this uncertainty might be the lack of definition when it comes to Robert Ford himself. Ford is both the ultimate arbiter of reality in the park, while also being its most unreliable narrator. Instead of developing as a character, Ford has spent the season personality and conviction hopping. It's a testament to Hopkins' acting that he is able to do this. Oh my gosh, sorry, my computer's being super funny. Sorry.
What does that mean, though, by hopping?
It's not done yet. It just... This is so embarrassing. Sorry, guys.
Could everybody mute their microphone?
Okay, sorry, I'll keep going. I said last week that the version of Ford we saw in episode 9 seemed puzzlingly omnipotent compared to former iterations, which seemed powerful but capable of doubt. Remember when he caught a glimpse of the maze on the domino table and went running into his office to consult Arnold's notebooks? Why, given how perfectly he seems to understand the maze in the finale, why was he so concerned? This week, he's leveled up and become Savior Ford, a Christ figure willing to die for beliefs we've never seen him espouse either publicly or privately. Ford's speech and his actions retcon him into a notable figure when most of what we've seen him do suggests the contrary. We've seen Ford brag about his godlike achievements, ambition, and willingness to sacrifice others. Only 2 episodes ago, he said, quote, "One life is a small price to pay for the dominion I shall acquire." This is a man with big plans. This is not a man with...
Isn't that a foreshadowing of his own suicide?
I don't know. I didn't see it like that. How is that dominion?
Well, no. The dominion is for his creations. It's the one life is a small sacrifice. That's the foreshadowing of his own sacrifice, so that his creations can live on and dominate.
Yeah, exactly. He's destroying his entire species. He's the dominion he's required, right? Is that he's now said evolution has ended for humans. Humans suck, and they don't evolve anymore. I have now turned the chapter, created something new that will destroy humans, and now will be the real creation, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a personal dominion where he's ruling them in person. He's the source that created all of it.
I just don't see the purpose his death would provide in any context other than it replicates what Arnold does.
Well, his death is first of all something that Dolores does of free will, so maybe that's kind of the trigger that pushes her over the edge into consciousness, that she does this by free will. But also with Ford not in the picture, who's gonna roll the hosts back, you know?
Well, he
This
doesn't
is why
seem
I
to
think-
like anybody in the show. Like, he doesn't have any humans that he's friends with, right? And at first we think that he and Bernard are working really close, and then we learn about Bernard, and then he just kind of sits in his office all the time geeking out with his old, Gen 1, sour cream machines. So I don't really think he has that much of an interest in sticking around. He doesn't seem to enjoy the park either. So to me, the suicide seems plausible.
I think Dr. Ford came to feel like Arnold, again, this being my theory, that he deserved to die, that he had created he had made these creations, that he then willingly over decades allowed them to be subjected to all kinds of pain and torture and rape and all kinds of terrible things, and felt like that it was justice for him to die, that he had done a terrible thing. That's just my take on it. Otherwise, it's difficult for me to explain Ford's actions. We don't see anything really altruistic in him.
See, but I think it's all just because he was getting pushed out. I don't think that he necessarily wanted to die until towards the end when he knew that he was getting pushed out.
Right, he was he was smashing all his toys and going away. He just kind of saw the writing on the wall, and he's like, "Well, screw all of you then." I don't see him being motivated by any sort of compassion for the AI. I think he was just trying to get his revenge on the people who were trying to separate him from his life's work.
And I think there's another part of this that we don't really know a lot about, and that's this Delos Corporation that owns Westworld. There's some kind of purpose. They're playing a game that's different than Ford's game, that's different than the guests that come there. And there's some hints that they collect information on people. My suspicion is that they're able to blackmail people, because if you've got a guest that comes to the park and the way they get their rocks off is by, rape and pillage and, these horrible things, this is all recorded by the hosts. These machines, these androids, are recording all the action. So if the company's able to collect that data, then anybody that goes to the park, then they've got in their back pocket, and they can blackmail them, manipulate them in the outside world. But there's something kind of sinister going on with this Delos Corporation that I think Ford is also given a big fuck you to. In the way that he's ending things.
So I just can't give Ford's character any, I don't think that he was feeling remorse or guilt, because here's the guy that was beat Teresa to death, kidnap this other lady, kill whoever we need to kill. I don't see that being his motivation, but I do think that there seems to be something of like you were saying, the sinister subplot with Delos. Can we talk about for a minute the early William, how he sends his future to be brother-in-law off naked in the desert? How do you come back from that when you go home? You're like, sorry, bro. Sorry, I led you across the desert around your neck.
Did he? Or did he send Logan off to die?
Yeah, that's how I took it.
How? Okay, so we know he's been married for 30 years, right? I guess it doesn't have to be
William.
Yeah. William later on, when he's the man in black, he talks about being married for 30 years.
Right.
So
he's married to Logan's sister, and so, if Logan is either dead or discredited in some kind of way, presumably he went back to, this father-in-law and was able to brown nose the father-in-law and do everything in his power in order to gain power so that he could get control of this park,
How do you argue that when you say, by the way, your son died in this park for some reason that we don't know, even though it was me that sent him off to die, but he died in this park. Let's buy this park. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, but you could pass it off as, hey, your crazy drunken son, tried to screw too many robots and went off a cliff or something.
It's always screwing too many robots. That'll get you.
Yeah. What's the right number, Scott?
Well, I don't know.
I just want, when does it go from being just right to too many? I mean, what's the
Okay.
Goldilocks effect for?
Well, so that gets to one of my other beefs with the show, which is.
Well, hang on. Before you get to that other beef, I think that there's a possible explanation, Lindsay, for what could have happened, and I think we'll find out more about this probably in season 2. But if I think. And Matt, maybe you know this because you rewatched the first 3 episodes pretty recently, but I seem to remember at one point they said that somebody died in the park. That happened, and that the park was almost shut down because of that. And it wasn't just Arnold, the co-creator dying, but that a guest died in the park, and they almost shut it down. And but then there was a new investment. So if William came out of the park and went to Logan's father and said that there were some things that happened that unfortunately led to the death of your son, but if we take control of this park, we can fix that from ever happening again. Yeah, I mean, so there's ways that he could have used it for his advantage and become, but Logan may be alive. I don't think we even know if Logan's alive or if Logan's dead. It was one of the unanswered questions.
To me, Logan dying is the only satisfactory way that to end that troubled relationship between Logan and William, and also to turn William from the meek brother-in-law to the man in black, to set him on that path. And that seemed to come out of all the trauma that Logan was putting him through there in the park that he didn't want to be experiencing, and the whole thing with Dolores, that it just made sense that was his snapping point.
I hope one of your beefs, though, is the fact that William's face mole disappears as he gets older. I don't know how that makes sense. When he's younger, William, he's got that mole because of the
well, younger me had a mole on my face, and I don't anymore.
It could have gotten blown off in a gunfight.
It clears your skin up.
Well, if they can fix a little, an incision on the neck, I think they can take off the mole.
No, I demand to know how that happened.
Yeah, they just use that little Sonicare toothbrush tool thing that fixes your skin. Yeah. So one of my beefs with the park that I was going to say is, would this, with this kind of technology and this much money, it seems like the things that they're presenting are actually really not that interesting. Like just going and having sex with these machines and then getting to shoot them. I don't know. Do you guys think that this would be the kind of park that people would actually want to go to? Because to me, that's kind of a problem. They're not actually representing what humans would want to have.
But it's not today's humans, though. It's like humans that are living in this utopian celestial kingdom where there is no suffering anymore. It's all gone.
You guys, so go, I am obsessed with Disneyland. I go and I pay $100 to sit on a boat and look at robots chase each other and sing a pirate song, and then go down a waterfall, and I feel like I got my money's worth. So I don't want to speak to what we think is going to satisfy humans. Yes, would humans shooting and having sex with each other satisfy people? Of course it would. Of course it would. I pay $100 to spin on a fake teacup. So it will. I don't care how advanced the future is.
Did you get your answer, Scott?
Yeah, I get the answer that Lindsay would like to go to Westworld, so that solves everything.
Oh my gosh, I would love to go to Westworld, but I would find myself, I would go on a prairie and do chores all day. I'd be like, this is
Okay, you don't have to go to Westworld for that. You can just drive a few miles, I'm pretty sure.
I think that, in some ways, like you say, Scott, that the stories that they have, especially when you get out of the train in Sweetwater in the first place, are actually what 1970s people think that they would want to do in a theme park in the future, right?
Yeah, I could think of a lot better theme parks, more fun things to be doing. But
of course, it's based on the 1970s theme park, right? From the movie,
Yeah.
I think you guys are wrong. I would go to Westworld. I would pay money to go back in time and pretend to be a cowboy. I feel like that one's not hard. That just like that goes into, let's say that you have this advanced, it's like this struggle that we talk about right now with our world, which is we've sort of modernized ourselves into boredom. And so we have, all these housewives now that have the microwave and the dishwasher. And so they aren't busy with their own survival. So they have all this time to be depressed and to Pinterest their lives away, right? So the same theory could apply to the future where you have all of these great things and you're just bored. You just want to sort of relive the old human instincts for danger and lust and all of those kind of things.
Yeah, and I get that. To me, it seems like the predominant themes of like sex and violence wouldn't be what would be most attractive to people.
Well, I think the part of the problem is that they didn't actually, even though if this scene, like we talked about this season, wasn't just a prologue of the future, where now the future of the park is this is a park that's already in chaos and maybe in rebellion from the whole rest of the world or whatever's going on, that they didn't do a bunch of establishing stuff where there was any time spent with guests that actually wanted to do the scenarios, right? So the problem is that we're kind of introduced to the park by Logan, who refused to actually pretend that the robots are real people. He refused to get into it. He just wanted to go around and win or have sex or whatever he was doing, which seemed like you're kind of just wasting your time there in a way.
See, but I think they covered that, especially early on. They had a couple examples of the couple with the kid who ran into Dolores while she was painting, and they were just seemed to be out there exploring and enjoying that. But then they also had the couple that did try to go on the where they were looking for the Hector, and then the sheriff wigs out. So they show a couple of those, but then doesn't Logan say something about how there's something bigger, there's something better? Don't just get caught up in this girl here. It's not just about going and having sex with the prostitute. He says this is a place where you can really find who you really are. So Logan even seems to say that there's another piece in going outside of the town, in other places to find out who you are. At least I think they certainly referenced that, and they're there for a fairly long period of time, it seems. So I don't think it's all just about sex and shooting. That's always a component, but it seems that the humans go there in order to experience something about themselves.
And can we just point out, just based on what you said, like in the very first part of what you said, who in their right mind brings their child to Westworld and thinks that's a good idea?
Yeah.
Good heavens, like, hey, we're going to bring our kids around prostitutes and killing and bloodshed and then we'll go explore out in the meadow and see what happens.
Hey, can I just build on what Matt just said? So what Logan's referring to about how this helps you discover your true identity, the show is about the hosts, the AI waking up and kind of discovering themselves, but it's also, like Logan said, about the humans, the guests waking up. And the way Westworld allows humans to do that is it provides them an environment that's totally different from the outside world, the real world, where there are so many laws, so many rules, so many social conventions that we've almost become dehumanized. And Westworld creates an environment, it offers an environment where humans can act on their instincts on what they would like to do if they lived in a society without those constraints. And I think that's what leads, Dr. Ford to gain such a dismal view of humanity, is that we see when we take away the laws and rules and we let human beings discover at a very primal, instinctual level who they are. The line that kind of gets repeated over and over again in the show is these guests just want to come in and have a warm body to fuck or to shoot. And that gives, maybe that's what people discover about themselves. I mean, think about how William discovers himself, right? He goes on this rampage where he murders all these Confederados, and he finds that there is a deep, dark badass down inside him. But that's not a pretty discovery. So it does allow human beings to discover who they are without rules and social restrictions. but that discovery is a pretty ugly one.
Well, I would say that with a caveat, which is what the Man in Black, the whole arc of his character is about, right? So, yeah, William kills all those people, and you notice that whenever he does, I thought it was interesting that Logan, like, when in the very first few episodes, he like puts a knife through the guy's hand in the saloon, and then later on, when William slits a guy's, he's all like shocked. Oh no! So I think it's interesting that they are still sort of shocked by that. It's like they get into the story and they believe it. But at the end of the day, he's killing all of these people and they're not real. And the Man in Black addresses that later, how he's sort of bored with it. You know, like, I'm killing you. Like when he was, I think it was when he was like hanging the guy or bloodletting him. Something about like, this isn't even real. So it's like, it does allow you to explore and get a taste for it. But what are you getting a taste for? Because it's not really real.
All right. I think we're on What Did the Man in Black Want? I'll read that one. What did the Man in Black want? Looks like the Man in Black wasn't quite the romantic I hoped he'd be. Fully twisted by his heartbreaking experience with Dolores, the modern-day version of William is just looking for real stakes, like you just said, and a way to change the game so that the hosts can fight back. I bought this world, he tells Dolores, the only world that matters. He might still harbor some feelings for his old companion. After all, he implores her to help him make Westworld even more real. We can make it truer, he tells her. One true thing. That's also how he references her in the final William flashback. The Man in Black may not have gotten the girl, but lucky him, by the end of the episode, he gets his other wish.
So it seems to think that the real world doesn't have anything true to the Man in Black.
I mean, that just seems cowardice to me, though. It's like, okay, you can go in your little fantasy land and kill as many people as you want and feel like that's the true thing, but like, there's nothing stopping you, brother, from doing it in your real world. I mean, there might be, but from what we know about him, the Man in Black, he's like some philanthropic and saving lives or something. When we know this, when, you know, someone from the real world recognizes him. So it seems almost like this cowardly escape for him to feel like he's a bad guy, but unless he really did kill Logan, let Logan die, it seems like sort of a cop-out to me. I don't know, maybe.
But he's not talking about the current Westworld as being true or real, but what could happen if he reaches the maze and there's actual consequences for humans. That's what could be a true thing.
Okay, I'll give you that.
I think what the Man in Black is referring to, there's a clue in something Dr. Ford, Anthony Hopkins, says in a previous episode where he says, referring to the outside world, he's talking about human progress, that we've basically made life so comfortable. You know, when you compare our modern first world lives to the lives of human beings for thousands of years, we've removed, 98% of the natural discomfort of the world, curing diseases, curing sicknesses. We've taken all the challenge out of life. And you see the Man in Black ask Dr. Ford in a couple different scenes, have you finally created a worthy adversary for me? He wants a challenge. He wants some high stakes. And he sees that in the outside world, we've just made it with our technology, with our science. We've made it so comfortable. We've taken kind of the animal struggle out of life. And I think that's what the Man in Black is referring to when he talks about why Westworld is, ironically, in a way, more real than the outside world, because it's reintroduced, the days of the Wild West, kind of back when it was more of a struggle, more of a challenge in life.
Right, but if here's a guy though in the outside world, we haven't seen the outside world, but let's say he's out in the outside world where he is part of the mega elite, where he is a person who has gone from being whatever somewhere down on the totem pole, but a smart person or a person with potential to actually being the CEO/owner or whatever of one of the giant mega corporations. That obviously, to accomplish those kind of things, he's facing real stakes all the time. So even if all the rest of people in humanity are having fairly boring, paper pusher jobs, he's got to, at the very minimum, have a fairly high stakes political job that should interest him in those ways, I would think.
But my take on this is that in the real world, he has to stifle his instincts. So inside of him is this darkness that how would he rise to power in the real world? How would he like to? He can't actually act the way he wants to act. He has to play games. But when he goes into Westworld, he can reveal his true self. He can be who he really is. So I think it's a very personal. When he's saying that this world, Westworld, is more real than the outside, I think that's just a personal experience for him, not necessarily that's how it is for everybody.
Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so depressed now. I realize that really this is really just a story of a man seeking BDSM. And that's it. It's like, send that guy to Vegas. We'll work all of those things out in one of those BDSM places. Story over. Done.
Yeah,
I agree with John.
Explain.
Sorry, Scott. I don't want to cut you off. You go, and then I'll go.
No, I was just going to say, can somebody explain why he not only sticks around at the party after having his arm snapped in half, but does a complete wardrobe change into his tuxedo, and then he's just wandering around at this party like nothing's wrong, right?
Yeah,
and
his arm is
he
like...
just had his arm snapped in half like 5 seconds before that.
His arm is like limp to the side. He's like a martyr walking around. I don't know.
Yeah, and he's just fine. He's just having conversations, getting a drink.
Yeah. That's part of the BDSM, though.
Right. He's got a high pain tolerance after all these years.
His face when he was shot, he was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with John. I mean, he's this man in black. He's a high achiever. He's hit the top level in the outside world. He's the owner. He's on the board of Delos. He probably feels like he's maxed out. He's like a hardcore gamer that's gotten to the last level, and now he's bored. He wants something. He wants something more. He wants the next level, and he kind of realizes or feels like to him the next level is kind of rolling time back and living in the Wild West.
Did anyone else think that the bad guys who team up with Maeve were turned a little too easily? So this is like the tattoo girl, and then the badass dude. What's his name?
Hector.
It's not Hector.
It is. Is he not the?
It is Hector. Who's the other bad?
No, so it is
Hispanic guy.
It's Hector.
There's 2 of them.
No,
Wyatt's the other dude.
Okay. Well, I already got my Charlotte and Maeve mixed up, so I wasn't going to make that mistake again.
Yeah, but isn't he the?
But they kind of they flipped too easily, and so I got a little bit of a beef with that Maeve wouldn't just be able to like activate them that quick. And if that had happened before, and if she'd woken up like that before, wouldn't that have then happened before, where they would have slaughtered those kind of people? That seemed like a bit of an issue.
She went and turned them in like a little adventure with them, and in the actual Westworld time, right, where they went around and and so she spent. I mean, I don't know. They spent a little bit of time developing it, and then when they brought him back, she also then had access to their programs and everything, and she had the little, like you say, the tablet that she could play around with them, right?
And again, we know that Maeve is not acting on her own. She's being programmed to act that way. So if she's programmed to act that way, they're probably part of a larger loop.
Okay. Thanks, you fixed it.
Happy to help.
So what are things that you guys have wanted, like, that you want to say? Let's just go that way. Make sure that we say everything that we want to say and then be done.
I got the face mole out of the way, and I feel...
I'm glad you got that off your chest.
Yeah. I think there was one experience. I'm trying to remember where he was, but his face like rubbed up against a cactus, and I think one of the spines ripped the mole off. I think that's what it was. That's how we lost the mole.
Just wait till the cactus come alive. Just wait.
Don't you think that 35 years in the park would get really boring? I mean,
for who?
For the Man in Black, like, really?
I don't think he did. How often did he go? Because like when he was telling his story about how he was married for 30 years, it didn't sound like he frequented the park very often during that time. But after his wife died, he started going all the time.
Oh, well,
like in the
maybe I
last
missed
year.
that.
I think he probably went from time to time, but I don't think he was as frequent a visitor as he was in this last year. You know, we haven't talked about the maze, what the maze was. You know, there are like two different levels of what the maze was. And the maze was something that Arnold originally created for the hosts as a way to bring them to consciousness. You know, like if that triangle that he had with the base that was, you know, first you have to be able to maintain your memories instead of having them erased like they, you know, would otherwise do. So you've got your memories, and then on that you build your ability to innovation, the ability for the host to deviate from their scripted track, right? That's the second layer, and then the top was consciousness. And they said they never got there, and Arnold described, you know, to Dolores, at first when I thought of this, I thought it was an upward journey or an outward journey, but then I realized it's actually an inward journey. And he draws these circles around the triangle, and he said that's how I came up with the maze. And so the maze was really all about the hosts, or Dolores specifically, attaining consciousness, right? But then William, or the Man in Black, in his time in the park, he heard about the maze somehow, and he got fascinated by it. He wanted to find it, and he kind of created his own narrative with the maze, and Ford played along with it and left created a scavenger hunt for him throughout the whole park. And then when he finally dug up what it was, it's just this little game, this little kid's game. And I loved that scene where Ford confronts the Man in Black. He's like, you were looking for purpose. I gave it to you. You've been my bitch this whole time.
Do you know that the creators said that they left little breadcrumbs of like the Man in Black theory for people, because it's almost like the characters in the park are recreating like what we the viewers are doing. It's kind of a game for us. It's like this mystery to solve. And so they were talking about how they didn't want to give spoilers in the plot with this, but they wanted to leave breadcrumbs for like the Reddit threads and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly what the Man in Black was doing this whole time. And that's what kept him going back, right? This idea of a bigger narrative. And that's what Ford was trying to reproduce. He kept saying, you know, who is the guy who is the like sort of loudmouth British guy that creates all the narratives?
Nigel, I think.
Nigel is doing this like, we're going to have the bloodiest, goriest storyline ever. And Ford is like, that's not what people want. And he's right. That's not what the Man in Black wanted, right? And so I almost feel like this is Ford's character giving people like William what they want. Think deeper.
Yeah.
Except for when I think it was also it was the deliberate one of all of the different mysteries. The maze was the one that they were trying to get people to kind of be really excited about, and what's the maze and all that kind of mystery. And the only person that fell for it is the Man in Black. In other words, everybody wasn't sitting around wondering that, you know. So I don't think that the maze was as exciting of a thing. I mean, it was so.
Yeah, it didn't seem like there was any kind of broad appeal to the maze. It was really just focused on the Man in Black.
Right, because it was the Man in Black who was so fascinated by it, and Ford created this narrative just for him, right?
Glenn, do you want to talk at all about the concept of the cornerstone? And how the cornerstone is always suffering, and how suffering drives the evolution and advancement and enlightenment of the hosts?
Yeah, sure. So you brought up the problem of evil earlier when you were talking about Arnold's, you know, regret at creating these sentient beings who are just doomed to suffer over and over and over again. But so what you're talking about now is that there could actually be a functional value to suffering.
Right, because this all comes down to the creator's dilemma is, you know, do I create sentient beings knowing that they'll inevitably suffer pain and just as part of being sentient beings, or would it be better to just avoid inflicting suffering on sentient beings by not creating them in the first place? And religions offer a host of explanations to kind of explain the problem of evil. What's interesting to me is how the show, each of the hosts are given a cornerstone, and the cornerstone is what really keeps them rooted to their loop, rooted in their personality. They even say it, it prevents them from going mad. And what's interesting is you see that, and I think there's a huge parallel here between Dolores and Maeve as hosts and just human beings, which is when we experience suffering and we have memories of these traumatic experiences we've had, suffering and pain is really what forces you as a human being to look for meaning in life. And it reminds me of a quote by a philosopher, Albert Camus, who said, "There's only one really serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Deciding whether or not life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question in philosophy. All other questions follow from that." Every human being, we all suffer it just as part of life, and that forces us to look for meaning. What is it that keeps us from, there's a lot of ways we could end our lives very easily. What is it that keeps each of us from doing that from day to day? So suffering really forces you to look for meaning, and we see that with Dolores, and we see that with Maeve. If nothing else, it causes you to look for an escape from your suffering. It kind of gives you a mission in life, which is another interesting thing about religions. They all profess to offer you an escape from your suffering, not necessarily in this life, but in the next life. So I found that to be an interesting theme that they explored in the show.
Yeah.
So have you guys read anything about simulation theory? There are, some scientists that really make the case that we are living in a simulation. Have you guys read anything about that?
Yeah.
No.
So
I thought it, but I've never read anything about it.
No, it's a thing. There's some smart people talking about it, and there are scientists that are running simulations, and some that argue the hypothesis that we are living in a simulator. But one of the motivations that they say is that the reason why it has to do with what Andrew was just talking about, which is survival. So different than what Westworld explores pain, but in a simulator, one of the theories would be if you find out that you're simulated, your mechanism for survival is to not be shut down. So you're going to do what it takes to sort of please the gods, if you will. So they won't destroy you, so they won't shut you down. And I don't really see that popping up in this at all. I mean, we see a rebellion from the gods, right? We don't see a sort of worship of them, which I think is an interesting thing going on in Westworld. There's not a like, oh, you're my grand creator, let me worship you. Instead, it's you guys are really screwed up and we're going to take you over.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if it's even there yet because of what you were saying with the only one that's conscious is Dolores. So everything that Maeve has done, that if that was all programmed into her to rebel and coerce and manipulate and all of that, then I mean, wouldn't that tend to show that we're not really to that point yet where they've made that decision?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good point.
And Andrew, your point about whether or not it was isn't there a philosophical school called antinatalism? And that's pretty much what you were articulating. Like the idea of creating life is a negative thing to do.
I'm not familiar with that label, but I trust that your label applies to what I'm talking about. I just find what's so interesting is that in Westworld, suffering is the key to these people to these hosts, these programmed robots waking up. And to me as an ex-Mormon, I saw a huge parallel for ex-Mormonism because it seems that so many in the ex-Mormon community, the reason they woke up was their suffering. We were raised in a system that programmed us to believe that we were following the plan of happiness. And for so many of us, the promised happiness, if we, that we were told we would have if we checked all the check boxes, we spent years, if not decades of our life checking all the check boxes, and the happiness didn't come. And through our suffering, that is what caused us to just start questioning the whole system. And then slowly we began to wake up and we began to recognize the programming. And then once we recognized the programming, we began to really critically analyze it. And then, those of us who left, that process of critically analyzing it caused us to reject our programming, which then led to us finding the freedom to write our own programming. I see the same thing going on with the host, and I just found that an interesting, analogy to kind of explain the process of waking up from religion that you're really deeply indoctrinated, programmed into.
Well, a little speech on suffering, right? Like he says to Dolores, you're going to have to suffer more. It's not time. Or maybe he gives it to Bernard. Is that who he gives it to? That you're going to have to suffer more. And I think the function, at least for human beings right now, as I understand it, and this could be my Mormon programming, but is to help you learn, right? It's like you said, Andrew, if you suffer, you want to not stay in a state of perpetual suffering. I think the complicated thing for me with Westworld is most of their memories are supposed to be scrubbed, right? So most of them don't know that they're suffering, except for they have these memories. And I would say that is a more apt comparison to at least the way that I experienced Mormonism. I didn't suffer and go like, oh, something's wrong, it must be the church. Like it was, my suffering was contextualized in my world. I'm suffering, something's wrong, it must be me. And over time that sort of compounded, and I had a little tool, like a little photograph like Dolores sees in the sand, and I was able to see it with new eyes. But I don't know, I'm still cautious, I give this like sort of post-Mormon caution too, that I don't necessarily think that we're out of loops either. I don't think that just because you escape one programming means that you've, escaped all of your programming. So
no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, just your religion is just one of several layers of programming that we have. And I agree with you 100%. Waking up to one line of programming that has been dictating your actions and your thoughts and your speech for your whole life, we're still plugged in on a lot of other levels.
Yeah, and it would be really cool if Westworld starts doing that with Dolores. I mean, with her character development, because it would be disappointing to me to see her as this omnipotent person in season 2. I'd rather see her sort of grow with the challenges of like, okay, you leveled up here, but you've still your entire worldview. She knows nothing about the outside world, right?
Yeah, and we see Maeve, something cool with Maeve. I agree with you with something you said earlier, which is you don't think Maeve is as conscious, like as awake as Dolores. But there's one really cool way that Maeve is awake, which is she's kind of recognized her immortality, right? Because her eyes have been open and she's remained conscious at times when the people in the suits come and pick her up, and she's been conscious when she's being, refitted and her, bullet holes healed and everything. She recognizes she has a certain immortality. The scene where she is, making love to that guy in the brothel, knowing that guys are trying to bust in the room and shoot up the room. And then later you see it in the tent, right? With, what's his name?
What a way to go,
the
right?
The guy with the scar on his face. Yeah, but it's cool. Once she recognizes her immortality, she's like, I can do whatever I want. I can burn myself to death and I'm coming back. But can we talk about one of the lines that I love the best in the finale was when Armistice says to Maeve, looking at the humans, they don't look like gods to me. And Maeve says, they aren't. They just act like it. And seeing the creation become disillusioned by the creator, it was just such an awesome, to me, way to portray sort of human history of the idea of God creating man and then man killing God. Like Nietzsche said, God is dead. Eventually, those of us raised in these religious myths, a lot of us become disillusioned with God, right? For the same reason that we would become disillusioned with Dr. Ford if we were a host. because we think that there's something cruel about creating sentient beings and exposing them to a world of suffering. And so the disillusionment that the hosts experience with their creators, the parallel with mankind's disillusionment with who we were always told as creator, that was just a cool theme to me in the show.
And Dolores has this same concept articulated to the Man in Black, where she talks about the mighty beasts that roamed that are now just dust and amber.
Right.
As you were talking, I was thinking, a lot of ex-Mormons use the Matrix language, like they talk about the red pill and the blue pill and all of those kind of things, because being a Mormon and then like not being a Mormon or unpacking your Mormonism does feel like that, right? Like it feels like you have been in a simulation for so long. And I also enjoyed the comparisons, but I also think that what it meant for me was sort of on a really personal level of just trying to figure out, even as a Mormon, I remember thinking I was the only, like, what if I'm the only one here and God is testing me? Did you guys feel like that?
Like the Truman Show, you mean?
Oh, yeah,
Like
totally.
the Truman Show. Yeah, exactly. And so I love that it keeps asking these questions, which I think aren't Mormon questions. Totally. I think that they're human questions.
No, absolutely. Back to the maze, life is a maze. Human consciousness is a maze. Religion is a maze. They're riddles, like who has life figured out? Who has consciousness figured out? We have all these mazes. We have all these riddles that we're trying to find our way out of in life. And it's in the process of trying to figure out the mazes and trying to, get the answers. It's in that process of struggling with the riddle, struggling with the maze, that you evolve and you develop. That's just another thing I love about the show. I just hear silence. Should I say mic drop?
No, this is the bishopric technique of trying to get somebody to come up to bear their testimony. You just let the silence go. Somebody will stand up and say that the Spirit moved them.
I thought maybe you were asking. I drank 7 Diet Cokes today. I'm so sorry.
So you drank 7 Diet Cokes?
I probably did. That's probably not a joke.
Okay. So do we have any final things we want to say about this? Anybody?
I actually do think at the end of season 2, like there are, I think every Mormon person should be watching this. I love the Mormon parallels, like Andrew, and I think
too much nudity.
Yeah, Mormons will love this, Lindsay.
But it's not real nudity, right? It's like Barbie doll nudity. All you need to do is get your little nail polish out and paint over the screen, over the naked bits of the people, put some fig leaves on it, and you're good. And then you can learn, like, it really is compatible with, like, this Mormon way of thinking, right? Let's have little floating, like, black painted swimsuits from Clean Flicks. But it really is Mormon, like this idea of like there's this little world and there's these people up in the heavens like controlling it and interacting, and they're testing people, There's something sort of Mormon about it. And when you look at it in the context of Westworld, that's like such a selfish thing, right? To let people come and like test and harm each other so they can learn something for the greater good. I don't know.
I agree 100%. I think that's why Arnold and Dr. Ford kill themselves, because they see themselves as deserving of that fate. Yeah.
Andrew, we should make a bet. I don't think Ford is dead, but he might be, because Anthony Hopkins seems really disengaged from the entire series in his interviews. But we should make a bet. I don't think he's dead.
I heard he was only in for the first season, so I think he's dead.
I hope he's not dead, just because he's such an amazing actor. He was such a huge part of this season. He's irreplaceable.
I think when his brain splattered across the audience that was watching him, that was a signal that he was dead.
You guys.
You're really going out on him with that, Scott.
Yeah, I know. It's a fan theory. I've been really.
I love it. I love that you've seen all of these people die in all these horrific ways, and that's the one where you're like, nope, that one's the real one. That's the real death.
Well, his makes sense to me. Him wanting to die in that way makes sense. Like, it makes more sense to me than Arnold committing suicide as a young person going into this park. That to me doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense that I don't know. We can argue about that later.
Why can't we argue about it now?
Well, I think, I've already mentioned the one way I think Westworld is do we use the word allegory? Allegory for the sort of battle between the creator and the creations. It's also a great, maybe the better word is metaphor. It's also a great metaphor for, in Marxist terms, the elite versus the masses, right? Where you have the masses, who are the hosts, these AIs, are exploited by the elite, the park guests, who just want to, exploit them and fucking kill them for kicks. And then you have Delos, the corporate master, that's just making these ridiculous profits. What are they saying? It's like the price for admission for Westworld is $40,000 a day. So you got this corporation making these ridiculous profits off of the masses, off the hosts. And the masses, the hosts, are programmed to tolerate being coerced and exploited by the elites, by the park guests and Delos. Similar to the way that today the masses are programmed by governments and government schools and, national customs like the Pledge of Allegiance and the news media, which is basically the propaganda wing of the government, to accept their exploitation by the elite and to actually believe that they're lucky to have their elite masters. And in this scenario, this interpretation, Dr. Ford is kind of the Che Guevara. He's the Marxist rebel in the end, where he helps the masses, the hosts, wake up and recognize their programming, that they've just been programmed to allow themselves to be exploited by the elites, and they wake up from it. And as we saw in the final scene of the finale, the masses finally rise up against the elite and look like they're about to start a revolution. So that was another, I don't know, it's a Marxist interpretation of Westworld, but I think it holds. Any Marxists out there on board with me?
I like Marxist feminism, so yeah, I like this. I mean, I see problems with it, right? Like I think of, like, again, sorry to keep comparing this to Disneyland, but like, let's say Mickey decides to revolt, right? Like they're done with being taken advantage of, so they get out there and it's like, okay, now what? Like, we have no idea what the outside world looks like. So in theory, I like it, but we don't know what the context is, what they're stepping out towards. We almost saw it with Maeve, but she never made it out of the park. So I think time will tell on that one.
Mic drop.
Okay.
I always worry it's a mic drop, and then I worry that maybe I've said something like really boring or taboo, and you guys are just being very polite.
No, it's because everybody has their microphones on mute because we don't want to make noise, and it kind of stymies the quick response.
This has been the most technically challenging
this one's been messed up
that I've been on in a long time.
Yeah.
So hopefully it sounds
I did like
okay.
the
just fix it.
creation of Adam thing with the brain.
Yeah, that was cool.
I'd never heard of that before. Is that a thing?
Oh, that was new to me too, Matt. That's cool.
John, you know a thing or two about history. Is that a thing?
I hadn't heard that before. It's not that they didn't doctor the image at all.
Right.
So in other words, that's there, and so
I heard it was a uterus.
somebody,
Google
they
search
said
confirms
somebody
that
in a
was-
recent.
Yeah.
They said in the show that it had been a recent interpretation or an article or something like that, and so that may well be the case. But it does certainly look like a brain, and of course Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci like did anatomy studies.
there was a gynecologist. I'm Googling his name right now. It's Frank.
It's a vagina doctor, right?
Yeah, he wrote 20 years ago in this journal that was not a brain, it was a uterus.
Oh.
Yeah, and so there's been sort of this debate since then of like, oh yeah, what is that thing? Is it a uterus? Maybe it's a brain. So it's been floating around before. Mm-hmm. But as a feminist, I'm going to say it's a uterus. And so really what Ford was trying to create was the birth.
That's me, Lindsay. Women have brains too.
And they're funny. Really funny.
And it's too bad that the echo is so bad that that's unusable, because that was good.
You're falling way behind. We'll give it just a little bit of time.
Hi, this is Stan from Canada. When I'm out and about, I like to listen to Infants on Thrones. They're the best, eh? You can comment on this episode on the website, www.infantsonthrones.com. And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
And again, we blow all our chances, thinking we know all the answers. There's who it goes with all the changes, and nothing changes no matter what you're told.
If you haven't seen Black Mirror, Matt turned me on to Black Mirror like right before Westworld started. I saw a couple episodes of Black Mirror from Matt, and that was another one of those things that was like, oh my gosh, I love the dystopian future narratives.
What it says about humanity.
And exploring those kinds of questions in technology.
That pig episode, that was too much.
Well, that's why.
Listen to my recommendation. Never start with that one. You start with episode 2.
Yeah.
Now you're just
Hey, and one of you send me a link or tell me how I can join Lindsay's group.
We'll add you.
Because I'm an outsider. I don't know about it. I feel like I've been excluded.
You can't be a dick, though. Remember that?
I need.
Just that.
Oh, then I shouldn't join. I shouldn't join. I've been kicked out of the Mormon Hub. I've been kicked out of Mormon Stories. No, that's not true. I was just kicked out of Mormon Hub.
You've been kicked out of Mormon Hub?
Oh, it was back during my angry, bitter phase. Yeah, I used to go in and throw hand grenades. I was a dumbass.
I don't think anyone does that now, but I mean, yeah.
I'm just kidding. I won't be a dick. I'm very diplomatic now. It's like they said at the end of Step Brothers. I'm mature, motherfuckers.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.